where we start is with Sergiño Dest and his future. And I guess, Manuel, I'll start with the upfront question, right? You're very familiar with the Bundesliga. You host a podcast on the Bundesliga. Why would the great and almighty Bayern Munich be interested in Sergiño Dest if Xavi and Barcelona aren't?
That's a very good question. I think it all comes back to the initial interest that Bayern Munich had. Is it 2 winters ago now, I guess?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, they were very interested in signing him that summer, I guess. Well, the deadline day actually that year was on October 1st, right? So because of COVID, it was all a little bit moved backwards. But yeah, that year in 2020, Bayern Munich were very interested in signing Sergiño Dest from Ajax Amsterdam. And my understanding at the time was that the deal was pretty much wrapped up. The personal terms were agreed. I think Dest was already in Munich at one point to visit the club and watch a game at the Allianz Arena. And at the same time, Marc Overmars, the sporting director at Ajax, was also talking to Barcelona, right? Because they needed a new right back after Alphonso Davies completely destroyed the previous right back at the Champions League. And so that's at that point, like Dest was sort of talking to both. And then Barcelona came in with an offer that was around $23 million. But included also a bunch of options and extra payments, and Bayern Munich just wasn't willing to do that. Bayern Munich is a very well financially structured club, and they only spend what they have. They are also one of the richest clubs in the world in terms of what they actually have in their bank accounts, right? I think they're the only champion of all the champions in Europe, and there was a financial study done earlier this month that actually didn't run a deficit during COVID, which is actually very remarkable. So they looked at this deal and said, no, thanks. And we're like, well, Barca can have him. Barca signed him, and it didn't quite work out for him, which I think was actually predictable because of the way that, Bayern Munich uses wing backs is very different than Barcelona uses them. And it seems like it would have been a good fit for Bayern and wasn't a great fit for Barca. The problem, of course, is now his market value has collapsed, right? I think we had him evaluated at the max of $33 million. And in the recent Spain market value update, he went down through $19.8 million, which is a huge collapse. Mm-hmm. And Bayern Munich will look at this and say, why are we going to spend a lot of money on this, especially because we know where Barcelona are at financially. And, they might do something on that position because of Alphonso Davies' heart issue, mm-hmm. Which is my understanding is very minor. It's a precaution, but it takes time. It's not going to end his career. It's not going to be a big issue, but it's going to take a lot of time to heal because it is a heart issue and we have to be careful with that sort of stuff. So that's maybe the only reason why they're going to come back for it, even though he's playing on the other flank, but just to add a little bit more depth to the wing back position in general. But they're not going to pay what Barcelona is going to ask.
Well, you could argue that he actually has been better as a left back in some rare appearances on that mm-hmm. side, filling in for Jordi Alba, as well as with the U.S. men's national team, where he's been arguably better at left back as well in those appearances. Yeah. And I think we kind of get caught in two minds of this Dest situation where there's the business side of it, and then there's the mm-hmm. actual field performance side of it. And I think for those who have certain opinions of Dest, it becomes one or the other, and it can't just be both. It has to be one or the other, meaning if you're Sergiño Dest who wants to stay and fight for his spot at the club, that might indicate that Xavi's kind of said, hey, this guy for positional awareness is not what I want, is not what I need. Even a Sergio Roberto, when he recovers and Mingueza, they'll put Dest on the shelf for quite some time. I mean, not Dest, but sorry, then Alves pushing 39, that we have these mm-hmm. three other options that I'll always take over Dest, which is puzzling to me because I understand why Dest might want to even stay and fight at Barca, where his age being 21, and in theory, he is still improving. And then his timeline for progression works, I think, with the club's timeline, as opposed to Bayern, where, Bayern Bundesliga, they have time to really blood new talent. And they've done that with Alphonso Davies, and they're still contending for all the different titles while introducing new players. And yet, for Dest, there's definitely a jump that he needs to make. There's improvements he needs to make. But I guess Bayern would be more willing to say, hey, if you're one of our few projects that we're trying to work along and improve, then we can handle you and we can handle the 3 or 4 other players that we need to make that step up. While Barca, meanwhile, are saying, hey, we actually need you to be pretty well done already And we don't actually think, other than you have some physical gifts, but other than that, I mean, your 1v1 defending is good at times, where he's shut down Vinicius Jr. and Alphonso Davies with both El Clasico and for the US before, but also he's been completely torn apart by Granada and Elche, and you know what I mean? Like in a 4-4-2 situation, when the opposition is playing with that, he struggles there. So yeah, I mean, and also at his number, the other part of this business-wise too is that why is it Dest and why is it Frankie de Jong, whose names are being thrown out in the last week? Well, A, it's January, so people got to sell papers. But part two of that is that it seems that Barca still, I mean, truly still, if they're going to spend over the summer, which we'll get to in a minute, that Dest is one of the few that even at a decreased market value, they don't want a distressed asset on their hands. That's why they're pushing probably so hard to get something for him in January. So they don't have to, I mean, take an even lower fee in the summertime when he hasn't played for another 4 or 5 months under Xavi, because Xavi doesn't want to use him on the field.
No, and they also need the money, right?
Correct, right.
That's the thing with Barcelona, is that coming from the German perspective, and I know things are very different in Spain. They calculate. I guess they calculate finances a little different there than the rest of the world does. But in the Bundesliga, Barcelona wouldn't even receive a license to play in the league anymore, because of the debts alone. And yeah, I know I realize you can restructure debt and you can hold debt, and as long as your financial income is a certain size, that doesn't seem to matter. Only it does, because COVID has changed the world and has changed income structures significantly. It seems like the juggling that they're doing, it's close to €1 billion debt. I mean, that's remarkable. If you were a company, you would be dissolved. So it's that's I think where this comes in, and they're looking at this, and they see Sergiño Dest as a financial asset, and because he's American, or he plays for the US, I think there's that added bonus to it. The question is, though, of course, will Bayern Munich bite? I think there is some reasons why they might. Alphonso Davies has been mentioned, and if he can play on the left, sure. There's also, of course, the fact that he's American. Bayern Munich push heavily into the American market, and Julian Nagelsmann likes wingbacks. That's another good reason. Maybe he'll see them as a project, like he did with Angelino at RB Leipzig, who worked out really well, right? Mm-hmm. So I think there's some good reasons, but at the end of the day, the deal has to make financially sense for Bayern Munich. Otherwise, they're not going to do it. I give you a good example. Bayern Munich looked long and hard at Ousmane Dembele, which was I was kind of sad that you didn't want to discuss him, because I actually think that's a really interesting topic.
Well, I mean, you've got the floor here, so I think I think Culés would actually love to hear a fresh perspective on Dembele. Please.
I think Ousmane Dembele it's so interesting, because I remember seeing him Borussia Dortmund, and he was probably one of the most refreshing players, creative players I've ever seen my entire life. And he then, of course, he pushed for that move probably a couple of years too early. Mm-hmm. He's just too young, and I mean, we forget that he's only 24, which gives you the perspective of how young he was when he left Borussia Dortmund in a deal worth $147 million. You just have to get that figure in your head. That's a lot of money. I mean, I know it's pre-COVID, but it was a lot of money, and he's never really fulfilled that. Yes, he's won a World Cup with France, but he was a big hot topic at Bayern Munich as well, right? As a potential replacement for Kingsley Coman. But then Bayern Munich looked at his his wages and his structure. And that's not even his demands that he has right now, which is somewhere between 40 and 45 million euros before bonuses a year. And then they said, okay, well, we have Kingsley Coman, who's also a World Cup winner with France. He's injured sometimes, but so is Ousmane Dembele. But we can sign him because he's already within our club. It's cheaper for us to sign him to one of the most expensive contracts in our club than bringing in this new guy who we have to pay all his wages for and bonuses on top of that. So they signed Coman for 17 million euros a year before tax, right? And I think that's a key component right there to understand how Bayern might feel about the Sergiño Dest deal, because they might look at this and say, is this a transfer that's being pushed on us to alleviate one of our opponent's financial problems? And if they look at it that way, they will not do it. It's as simple as that.